So what this class has done is gone over traditional project management. And it's the same project management that's been used for 75 years. Now the question is how has this field evolved? If you have any field, especially something that's social science related, it has to evolve. It has to change because times change, technology changes, and everything else. Always remember, these are tools. They're tools for somebody to use. Some people know how to get the most out of their tools, some don't. But it doesn't replace concepts, and that's what this class focused on. It's all about executing, and executing comes down to the triple constraint. And my huge advantage, which I talked about before as an engineer, is I used to outperform other engineers on their projects. And the reason why is I came out of the semiconductor industry. And in the semiconductor industry, I learned project management discipline. So while other managers are just looking at their projects and thinking about things like bake time and stuff like that, I was thinking about cost, what resources do we need, what's the scope of what I had to deliver. And so naturally, this is why I delivered. And if you're the person who can get things done, there's always a job for you somewhere. When we talked about the classic PM approach, we talked about the phases. Uncertainty is a very big thing in all of this, that risk comes at the front and we're mitigating risk and worried about everything. And the key to learning through this is about feedback. But as you can see, the feedback doesn't happen till way later when we're actually executing. And not only that, but the mentality of project management tends towards to be risk aversion. And in that sense, it doesn't work very well for areas where you need to take risks like R&D. The thing is, Dr. Cho likes to talk about the pendulums. And what it comes down to is that project management, on one hand, may have gone too far to one side. That people are so interested in the processes and the procedures that they don't think about what it is they're actually creating. And creativity versus discipline is a constant pendulum that goes back and forth. The question is what kind of products are you making? Are they physical or are they digital? Because they're two totally different kinds of disciplines. And so the people in the digital area were kind of upset with traditional project management, and they don't think it worked very well. So what did they do? You have to look at the way it's changed over time. But what you see is the evolution of something new. And the thing is, people have always planned projects, but they've never really formalized it. And it was in World War II, including the atomic bomb. And when you look at all the pieces that had to go into making the bomb work, as you could see, and a lot of different stakeholders had to be managed in different places. And the birth of PM is pretty much marked to Deming. And Deming was a project manager during World War II. And Japan was a total mess after the war. And so MacArthur called up Deming and said, look, I need you to come to Japan. I need to get this country back on track. Well, they totally embraced what he had to say and what they needed to do. And this is why the Japanese car industry passed the American car industry in the 1980s. And they developed disciplines and knowledge areas. And then what happened in the 1990s is the software people said this doesn't work for us. And so what they did is they created a new approach towards project management. And that's referred to as Agile, which you have heard. And so after 2000, if you want to do project management software, you basically became a Scrum Master. And we'll talk about who that is. The thing about Deming is that manufacturing ran on a bunch of gut ideas, and he thought there's a mathematical way to do this and everything else. And so he came up with the idea of plan, do, study, act. And so measure what you do. And in 1981, Toyota surpassed Ford as the biggest car company in the world. And he came up with this discipline, which he called the 14 points. And 96% of it revolved around problems related to system problems, and 4% is about people. But people pick the systems they want. And one thing you see about quality is that Japan took a very long time to reach quality. If you watch old TV programs in the 1960s, the big joke is made in Japan, meaning that it's garbage. And then what happened? Made in Korea, it was garbage. Now they don't think that about Korea. And for a while it was made in China, it's junk. And so, but the Chinese are moving towards high quality very rapidly, much faster than the Japanese or the Korean did each generation. And it's because there's so many more tools, all the information's out there, and plus computing makes a big difference. These are Deming's 14 points, and part of it is basically understand your people and trust them. Things come out of people, and he said eliminate management by objective, and that's that the objective becomes bigger than what it is you're actually trying to do. And so the thing is, that's a pendulum. Deming was right. At that time, there was too much about objectives and actually understanding what it is that you want to do. For example, when you talk about goals, a goal isn't to get 10% growth. The goal is to create new products that can generate 10% growth, and that's what you need to focus on. Unfortunately, now it's kind of swung too far, and it's like, well, wait a minute. What is it that we're actually doing? Because the process has become bigger than the objective. The thing the PM is, we already talked about the 9 knowledge areas. The question is, who should lead? Is it technical backgrounds or business background? Competition is horrible. And the thing is, they have no incentive to move you up. If you're a good project manager, especially at Scrum, why do they want to promote you? And that's why later on what we'll see is that they've had to create new levels. Software was changed, and that's that they went away from procedure-oriented programming more towards object-oriented programming. And so it's about speed, test, and customer acceptance. Now, the traditional technique was called waterfall. And what it is waterfall is very much a project management disciplined approach. A lot of people didn't like the waterfall model because they thought it was too constricting. And when you learn something along the way, how do you go ahead and test it? When you look at this, it's not until the 4th step you really get into testing. And so they wanted to come up with a new way. Now, the thing is, a lot of people said, oh, waterfall's dead. Nobody does waterfall. But the point is, if you have a small project, waterfall still makes a lot of sense. And the thing is, if you have a clear, stable objective, waterfall works very well. The problem is when you have uncertainty, you have to go through all these phases, which makes it slow. So a bunch of computer scientists got together and they created something what they called the Agile Manifesto. Now, here's the thing. Agile works for certain products, but not for other products. For example, a lot of people applaud Musk because Musk is applied Agile. Here's the problem. Most people don't have the money and the resources that Musk has. Most companies are not getting tens of billions of dollars from the federal government to develop things for them. And so he can afford to do all these iterations like this because he has the money to fund it. But physical products are much different than software products. And so they came up with what they referred to as the Agile Manifesto. But a lot of these ideas are related to Deming about short loop experiments and things like that. And so subsequently, this mindset led to a whole new series of thinking about project management. And that Scrum led to extreme programming, which leads to feature development and dynamic systems and all the approaches that you see today. And what it comes down to is that the thing about Agile, it's about being iterative. Time in theory should be shorter, and the cost should be much less. But there's less focus on risk. And the reason why there's less focus on risk is when you're iterating quickly every day, then those risks come out very rapidly. And so the thing about Agile methodology is a technique truly Agile. And so Scrum was about breaking into smaller parts. Extreme programming, they thought they were getting away from programming, and it's the programming that should be the center. And then lean software development is typically you have a lot of different groups. So the question is, how can I coordinate this well everybody can deliver just in time? And so when we look at the change that Agile creates, whether it's the product vision, daily scrum you meet every day, each iteration you have a backlog, and the backlog moves to the front, and then you decide when it is you're going to release something. Now the thing is, your team now is around the product owner, the scrum master, and the development team. The scrum master is more or less, he's kind of like lieutenant and sergeant who make things run, and the product owner is more like the captain or the colonel who decides whether or not it's good enough. And so what you do every day is you have a sprint, or a sprint might last a week, and then you get something done, and then you decide if you want to release it. The thing is, software changes and iterations to a product can take place within 2 days. That's how fast this stuff is. And so here are the people who are involved. The thing is, the product owner is more involved with the project sponsor, and you still have the same kind of stakeholders involved. Here's an example of the Scrum flow chart. Product owner looks at what the product backlog is. You get together in your daily meetings and talk about, okay, what is it we're going to take off this backlog? You do your iteration. Now the question is some of these iterations might be a lot of daily sprints, one big sprint. It's up to the Scrum Master. And from that, you produce your product. The thing is, Scrum isn't perfect either. And that's that when you're doing things that active day after day, first of all, it's kind of a grind to have to go into a meeting every day instead of being left alone, because engineers need big chunks of time to do their stuff. And not only that, but the lack of attention to risk, there's still risk, and so there is an advantage. And that's why Wayne Green, who came and gave a talk in my entrepreneurship class, which is basically a product development class, he said one of the big skills that you need is how do you manage risk with execution? How do you trade off against the two of those? If you can do that, then everybody's going to want you. And I already talked about the problems with SpaceX. Extreme programming, more focused on the software, and that's that. How much code do I need? How is this going to work? Think of the story of how the users work on it, and then you come up with your plan and iterate. Then how do you accept? And then how is it that you're going to release it? And so I'll just leave this to you to look at it, what the difference between extreme programming and Scrum actually is. What they do have in common is they're not big efforts because you're doing little iterations. But the other thing is you need a lot of contact between people, and that doesn't translate well to telecommuting. And so the thing about the lean principles is they focus on all these things. And what it comes down to is you're trying to simplify it, reduce loss, and have the entire team on a daily basis involved. The thing is, companies tend to get very trendy. Like everybody right now, it's AI, 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 and they don't even understand it. And then they realize, hey, this doesn't work. For example, Six Sigma was the standard for many years. And then 3M all of a sudden realized that they stopped innovating. 3M, the company that created the sticky pad and everything else. And so what did they do? They got rid of it because they realized that it was too constricting. And so is it related to project management? Well, yeah, because it's still about initiating projects, planning, execution, and closing. It's just the criteria is different, and the amount of time spent in each is a lot different. And so, is quality transportable? Well, yes, if it's built into the processes. But then if everybody can do it, how are you going to get a competitive advantage? And so, right now, people are realizing the pendulum is swung too far to Agile, and so they're bringing it back a little bit. You might have people issues, but are you solving the right people issues? But once again, technology is a tool. It's not an ability. And so in terms of personnel who are the kind of people that you're looking for, thinking about what it is that you might want to break down into. There's no right or wrong, but there are people who are better suited for certain things than others. Some people love the daily excitement, and some find it as a grind. The thing is about project management is a lot is going to be formed around technology. And it's because when you think about the level of documentation tools we've used, and so the question becomes is, how can some of these functions be modified by AI? And so how do you make yourself valuable? Well, the thing about AI, everybody says AI is wiping out a lot of jobs. That is true. But it's jobs at the bottom. And so what it comes down to is things like, can you lead, and your critical thinking skills? That's what's going to give you an advantage. However, you need experience. You have to be able to validate those skills.